After I did the quarter, the Impala went back to gearhead, and while it was there, they dumped in the motor and a custom frame and undercoated the whole bottom side. We're nearly done with the mud. We still got the roof, and that's about it. But let's take a step back and talk about panel alignment. To get the rear deck lid lined up, you first want to create a base and have a nice even body line right there. But you don't want to do it too perfectly, because you're most likely going to have issues with this corner and that corner being up or down, and when you fix that problem, it'll shift the deck lid and mess up that gap. So don't get it too perfect, just set up a nice base. And on this one, these edges were too high, so what I did was I stuck a socket between here and there, long socket. And you have to lower it a little bit to give you enough space to stick it in there. And once you got it lodged in there, you push it up. And that'll lower it. The other option is to shim it down by putting some shims right here, and that'll lower this area. But we don't want shims right here where they're noticeable. So, putting a socket right there, pushing up on the rear of the deck lid lowers that corner. And I did the same with that one. If this corner was down, then I'd put a socket here, wedge it in there, and instead of raising it, I'd lower the deck lid. You don't want to move it too much. You move it a little bit, take the socket out, then you check your progress. Anyhow, once it was nice and even, then I recreated my base, got it nice and even, and that told me what was going on with the side. And in this case, this quarter was in a wreck before, and it was pushed in, so I had to push it back out. And I did that with a porta power, a 2x4 right here. And to shift this hood around, or deck lid, excuse me, you use these bolts right here. What I like doing is, if I loosen this one, I'm going to loosen that same one over there, and I'm going to push this way, or push on that side going this way. And then after that, I'll do the bottom one and do the same thing. And that's how we got our deck lid to line up. I also had issues with the quarter being low right here. So I had to stick a quarter power in a 2x4 and raise that area up. What I also like to do is take out the striker. And when I do put it on, I don't tighten these bolts up all the way, because the threads are potted metal. This is potted metal right here. So I keep it semi-tight till it's painted, everything's painted, and it's ready to roll. When it comes to doors, the first thing you want to do is take the striker out. And with these particular type of strikers, you also want to put a rubber stop on there, because it's very, very easy to destroy the striker by slamming the door, and this rubber stop's going to stop that from happening. So once you get the striker out, you mount up the door, and little heads up, this is how you adjust your gaps, and this is how you adjust the outward and inward tilt to ensure that it's level with the quarter and your fenders. Basically, the first thing you want to do is line up your base to the rocker and make sure the front of the door meets up with the front of the rocker and the gaps nice and even. And what I usually do is loosen up all these bolts, and from the back, pull it back towards the quarter and up, and then tighten the bolts, and then kind of walk it in. For instance, since it'll be up and there'll be no gap down here, I'll loosen those bolts, push down on the rear of the door, and it'll kind of settle in, and then I'll usually have to push it back up in the rear with these then loose, and then you know, obviously you tighten it up in the position that you like it to be in. And without the striker, you're looking at the gaps and, you know, making sure everything's lined up first before you put your striker in. And if need be, you can make very tiny adjustments with your striker, but you don't want to do it too much because the door won't close very good. Some of the things I had to do was I had to run a slice in this rocker, because when they put this rocker on next door, they didn't mock up the fender, so it wasn't flush with the fender when the fender was on. So I had to run a slice in that and manipulate the metal down there. This area right here was sticking out too far, and had to run a slice in the jamb and tuck that metal in and re-welded it up. I put a piece of sheet metal in this jamb right here to pose as the flange in the jamb. Tack that in there to close up the gap in that area. I also had to dolly some edges out. And if a dolly doesn't work, you could use a small slide hammer with an attachment that's small enough to fit in that gap. I also had to use a 2x4 and a hammer to hammer out some edges here and there. I also had to twist the door. And last but not least, I had to run a little bead along the edge of this door to close this gap up a little bit. As far as the tilts go, and this is a part of the reason why you saw me dolling down there in the bottom of the door and twisting the door while there was a little bit of filler on there. And the reason being is because when we put the hood on here and the fender was on here, to give the hood to fender more gap, we had to pull the fender out. Pulling the fender out made the fender stick out past the door, and that's where the tilts come in. So with the tilts, I loosened up these bolts, pulled out the door, tightened it up so it was nice and flush with the fender. But what happens when you pull it out here diagonally down there, it sucks it up down there, and that's why I was twisting the door with filler on it. On these doors, it's a little different. Your tilt is controlled right here on the A-pillar, and your adjustments are controlled right here on the door. So it's a little different. And you could get even more tilt by loosening up that bolt back there. You don't really need to do that unless you have to. So when it comes to fenders, there's usually a bolt up here and a bolt down there. Sometimes a bolt right here. The bolt right here, when shimmed, will give you more gap up top and will pull the fender this way. If I'm going to have shims anywhere, they'll usually be here and there. And the shims here will pull the fender out so it's flush with the door. The shims down there will lower the body line so they meet up. Okay, so now it's tightened up and the body lines match, so I know I got it shimmed right. So you get these gaps all good. Watch the gap on top. It's nice right now, but watch this when I lower it. Just on top. See that? Then you throw in your cowl panel and then your hood. Your cowl panel and fender might change according to how the hood fits. But yeah, I first start off with the 2 bolts right there, maybe a bolt right in the corner of the support, and everything else is loose. And you keep it loose up here because, just imagine a fender's here. The gap to the hood is right there, so you leave that loose in anticipation for the hood. More on that later. Now I know there's no hood here, but your hood's generally like your rear deck lid, with the exception being, you remember when I told you about the socket going over here to raise or lower the corner? Instead of doing that, you raise it by rocking the hinge forward or back. And you could rock your hinges if they're fastened to your apron. If they're fastened to the cowl, you can't rock them. You could raise them. You loosen those 2 bolts and raise it up, and it'll give you a little adjustment in the corner, but not as much as the normal traditional old schools where you could rock the hinges. This is a comeback. What it really is water spots on the door that I have to buff out. So I did a really quick half-ass masking job. Other things we got going on is the Nomad's almost done. We still got the Ford 500. Nothing has been determined on that yet. And I just started on the GTO 69. The Skylark has been painted, And God knows why we're not putting it together yet. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. We got parts for the GTO. We can't mount up the radiator support until we get some bushings for it. So I'm kind of just working around it right now. In here is the poo-poo room. We have a little side job right here, a little poo-poo GTO, and probably the ugliest car I've ever seen. This thing is horrible. God, this thing is horrible. Just a spot job. Might want to close this so nobody can see the car in here.